Good morning, Representative Dolan.
Good morning. How are all of you?
Good.
I'm doing pretty well. Some people.
Nice to see all of you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. So just so you know what we've been doing the last few weeks, we did some discussion in class over issues that students are interested in. And then we did some research on ledge.wa.gov on different bills. And students in every class chose a bill to write an argumentative paragraph for or against. And then after we wrote all our paragraphs, we did some polling in each class about which issues students were most interested in and whether they were for or against the bills on those issues. So here are 8 issues on this whiteboard that students thought were the most interesting. And then the 4 that students had the strongest opinions on were the immigration bills, Senate Bill 5803 around discrimination, and House Bill 1985, which provides some ways for folks who are undocumented to enter the workforce. And then drug disposal, which involves disposing of dirty needles, which was actually pretty controversial. We had students both for and against that bill, which I think is also similar to House Bill 1047. And then we had a standardized testing bill. Lots of students had really strong argumentative paragraphs in favor of House Bill 1256. And then also high school credits, House Bill 1509, lots of students in favor of that bill. So just so you know, that's kind of where the kids are at. And some of them have some statements for you and some questions for you. And that's where we're at.
Well, I'm really impressed. The way you actually interacted with that page and looked at all those bills, that's great. That's I'm really impressed. I would love to hear some of the students' thoughts on those.
So anyone want to volunteer to share their thoughts on these issues? Emma, I know you had a question prepared. All right, Emma's going to start out. And Emma, you can actually just stay seated right here. I think she'll be able to hear you in the microphone. Okay.
Some of the students in our class believe that Senate Bill 5929 regarding taxes and education should be passed. Those of us who believe this bill should be passed think that if you are given the chance, you should vote for the bill because it will affect our school's funding and help to make taxes more equal. Do you agree, and could you tell us why or why not?
Okay, so you guys have an advantage over me because you've been studying an exact bill, and I've been looking at like 2,000 bills. So let me talk just a little bit about testing. That's the issue of the bill, right?
Actually, this bill was the Senate Bill 5929, which is actually the House budget bill that Senator Dino Rossi put forward in the Senate.
Right.
So they were looking at that, and she said that students, did you say that students in your class were in favor of that bill?
Some, but not all.
Yeah, some students were in favor of that bill. So she's just wondering what your thoughts are on that bill.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Egren, for sharing that with me. So that bill is the bill that came out of my finance committee, and I'm on the finance committee, and all the language in that bill is actually the language I helped develop. I actually don't recognize it under the Senate bill number, but yes, so the pieces of that bill we spent months thinking through. We think that they are a way to really get sustainable revenue into the state of Washington in order to pay for K-12 education and all the other state services that we talked about last time. So I'm happy to talk about different parts of that bill. One of the pieces of that bill would be a capital gains tax. So these are taxes that we don't currently have in the state of Washington. Last time we talked a little bit about how regressive our tax system is because it relies so heavily on sales tax and property tax and a little B&O tax. And so we're trying to figure out ways to get more revenue streams into the state so we're not dependent on taxes that are that regressive. And again, when I say regressive taxes, they hit the people who are the poorest the hardest. I actually was looking at some data before I came in to talk to you this morning from 2015. And in 2015, people making less than or up to $21,000 a year, they were paying 16.8% of their income in taxes. Mainly that would be sales taxes because all of us, whether we're rich or poor, pay the same amount in sales tax. people making over $500,000 a year were paying 2.4% of their income in taxes. So it's really upside down. The poorest people are paying the most taxes. The richest people are paying the least taxes. So this bill that you're asking about really tries to get more taxes from the people who have more money, because right now, if you live in most other states other than Washington, and you're a fairly wealthy person, and you have some investments and you sell them in the stock market, in all those other states, you have to pay what's called a capital gains tax. It's a tax on the interest that your money made while you had it invested. But in Washington state, you don't have to pay that. So some of our wealthiest people in Washington, they're paying capital gains taxes in all these other states where they're selling investments, but not in their very own state where they live and have their business and enjoy all the natural resources of Washington state. So that's one example of a way that we're trying to get up there where other states are and have some of the same kind of revenue coming into the state. Another thing in that bill is a business and operations tax, a B&O tax, which is a tax on businesses. And again, trying to make it so it doesn't hurt small business. Small businesses really are kind of the economic engine of any community. And what happens is a lot of people take a risk, they put all their money into starting a small business, and then it never works for them. And so they put all their money into that, lost their money, and the business goes under. And so what we're trying to do is make it so the small new businesses don't have to pay any B&O tax at all. We don't want them to worry about paying B&O tax. We want them to worry about making their business sustainable. And so what we did with that piece of that bill is we said that businesses that make less than $250,000 a year would pay no B&O tax at all. Businesses that make $250,000 to $500,000 a year would get a $100,000 credit right off the top. So that would really help them and bring down their B&O taxes. And businesses that make more than $500,000 a year would pay what they pay now plus another 20%, which is how we can then make it so the smaller businesses, there are a lot more small businesses than big businesses. That's how we can make it so the small businesses don't have to pay the B&O tax, and the larger businesses pay a 20% more. So that's another way we tried to make it more progressive. Another thing we did is, you'll read in that bill, is called the real estate excise tax. And whenever you sell a house, you pay real estate excise tax. And right now that's like a flat tax, everybody pays the same. And so what we're proposing in that bill that you like is that people who sell cheaper homes, like less than $250,000, would pay less than they're paying now for that real estate excise tax. But if I'm selling a house that's worth $10 million, I'm going to actually pay more than I'm paying right now. So we took that tax and we made it, again, progressive. Let's see. There was one other thing I'll mention, then we'll go on. We right now, when you buy something on the internet, like if you go to Amazon and buy something, lots of times you don't end up paying sales tax for that thing you're buying. And so we're trying to work with third-party vendors and close that loophole so that we can actually get the sales tax for all of those things that are bought from people in Washington. Because right now we're missing a lot of that sales tax. So those are kind of some of the highlights of that bill that you like, and I'm glad you like it.
So there's one part of the bill that a few students wrote some argumentative paragraphs wanting to amend the bill, specifically around the issue of the water bottle sales tax. So I'm wondering if any students here can kind of share what their feelings were about the water bottle tax issue. Anyone here write one of those paragraphs? Bailey, did you have something to say about that? No. Okay. So a few students were I think that's the only controversial part of it for students that we had some discussion about in class. I think students here at Chinook, we only have one vending machine for drinks, and it's a water bottle vending machine. We don't have soda vending machines. So students were concerned about what that would do to the price of their water bottles in the vending machines.
So a couple things on water bottles. We all use them. I try to use them less than I used to, because what I know about water bottles is that plastic is getting into our oceans. It is turning into little itty bitty pieces of plastic. The fish are eating it. Pretty soon we're all eating those plastic water bottles. So plastic water bottles don't go away. So they're just not good for the environment, for one thing. The other thing is you actually don't need a water bottle to get water. Hopefully you have drinking fountains there in your school. And kids could, I'm guessing, bring water bottles from home, like metal water bottles that they can reuse. So there's a lot of ways to drink water that are free. And truly, the water that's in those water bottles is just water. It's no better water than the stuff you get out of the faucets. And you've probably seen some of the shows they've done on TV that actually show that the people that sell that water get it right out of tap water, put it in the water bottle, and market it like it's something special. So unless they're adding nutrients to it, it's just regular old water. So that's some of the thinking behind why we would include water bottles in that.
All right, thanks. So other folks that have questions or bills that they wanted to talk about? Leisha?
Well, kind of on Emma's question, was your idea to make wealthier people pay more tax or pay the same tax as poorer people?
So last time we talked, one of the students in your room asked a really good question about why is that fair that wealthy people who work so hard should have to pay more taxes? And so we've talked a little bit about the fact that actually they're paying by percentage of what they make less taxes. But Ms. Egren, I was going to give you a couple of websites that your students might be interested in going to and actually read a little more detail about this. And the reason I'm suggesting that is we are about to the place in the session that you're going to hear and read a lot about taxes, because we've been doing a lot of policy, and now we actually have to get down to that big question of how are we going to pay for this, which is what that bill was all about that you asked me about. So those are the discussions that are going to be taking place, and it'd be great if you went to a couple of these websites and learned a little more about what's happening in Washington State. Is the taxes that the state collects are going downhill in reference to where our incomes in Washington are going. So people are actually paying less taxes now than they were paying back in the 1980s and 1990s. So right at the time that we have to pay for K-12 education for the McCleary decision, as well as all the other important state services, we have less money coming in than we've had before. And it's really important to understand that we need to have a lot of different revenue streams bringing money into that budget and not just depend on things like sales tax and property tax. So the two sites I would suggest, one is called, the Washington State Treasurer's Office actually has a lot of good information on that. And then probably the one that might be the most helpful is the Washington State Economic and Revenue Forecast Council. And that's a long title, but if you just go to erfc.wa.gov, you can get to all that data. And I think based on the questions you have all asked, that you would find that website pretty interesting. I think you're asking the questions that website could answer for you.
All right, I just wrote those up on the board so students can access those websites, and I'll link them.
To these discussions, I think that the information you find on that last website I mentioned will be fascinating to look at as you're listening to what's going to be happening in the newspaper and the news.
All right, sounds good.
You know, let me tell you one more thing. There's a quote. You've been listening a lot lately about JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who would have turned 100, I think, right now. And in his inaugural address, which is back in 1963, and to put this in perspective, I was 11 years old watching that address. But one of the things he said about a democracy, he said, if a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. And there's nothing more true, really, than that statement, because a democracy depends on all of us feeling like we have a fair shot to go work hard and earn a good family wage living here in the United States. And as soon as you get into a situation where the ultra rich are getting all the money and the working poor don't have enough to even feed their own families, that's the downfall of any democracy. As you get older and read more about French history and all the different nations who have been in that boat, where you get such an income inequality between the kind of uber wealthy and then the people who are working hard but can never get enough food even to feed their family. People don't stay happy in a government like that. And so that JFK quote I thought was pretty accurate. And he said it in 1963. So think of that quote, go to that website and watch what's going to be happening in the media as these debates go on. And I think you can have some really great discussions in your classroom.
Great. I wrote that quote up on the board so students can think about it.
Right.
Discuss these issues. Other issues that students wanted to talk about. We've got a few up on the board. So David, you're already sitting here. Maybe Emma and Leisha can cycle out so Brian and some other folks with questions can sit over here.
So whatever you did with the microphone, it's much better this time.
This is the microphone, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a new microphone and new
Mine is
speakers.
with like standardized testing, like House Bill 1256. Like how, how would that bill get passed? Like, isn't it like starting to die in committee or something like that? The House Bill 1256.
Okay, so I'm not sure which bill that is, but can I do an answer to that question by going to a different bill that has to do with standardized testing?
Yeah.
Would that be, I think the conversation will be the same. And I'm going to actually put it up on screen and go to House Bill 1046.
All right.
So we're getting there. So House Bill 1046 is a bill that I have been spending hundreds of hours of my own life trying to get passed. And it has to do with what you're hearing a lot about in the news right now. There's a lot of students who are seniors who aren't going to be able to graduate in the next couple of weeks because they have not passed the biology test. They have not passed the standardized test that under our current state law, they have to pass before they can graduate. So where I personally am with that and where the education committee that I'm the vice chair of is with that is we do not think at all that high school graduation should be tied to any standardized test. The students who aren't going to be able to graduate next week, them have actually passed all their credits. They've passed all their classes. They've spent 12 years in school doing everything we asked them to do. And now this one test is stopping them from going on to college. So we feel like that's really a negative thing to do to our students. And we also believe that once you get that high school diploma, you can go on to a community college. You can go on to a four-year college. You can go on to some kind of an apprenticeship. And at 18 years old, you really want to move your life on. You don't want to be stuck trying to pass a test that really has very little to do with the curriculum that your teachers have taught you. So we are working really hard. In fact, check out the Seattle Times on this coming Sunday on the editorial page, and you'll see an op-ed that I co-wrote that's all about this. And we're working very hard putting pressure on the Senate right now. The Senate Republicans are refusing to pass this bill. And so we are putting a lot of pressure from a lot of groups like the PTA, like Washington's Paramount Duty, a lot of parents and kids to put pressure on the Senate to vote on this bill. Because if they refuse to vote on it, it can't pass. And we know, because we've talked to all the senators, that we think, every senator, except for 10 of them, that will vote for this bill. They want to vote for this bill, but their leadership won't let them. And the reason their leadership won't let them is there is this group called the Education Roundtable, which is made up of a lot of kind of the biggest businesses in Washington state. And they're pretty convinced that kids shouldn't graduate unless they pass this high stakes test. And what we say to them is we really trust teachers' judgment. If a teacher says you've learned what you've learned, we trust that teacher to actually vouch for you. And when kids are given credits in high school, we trust that those teachers are holding those students accountable to learn what they're supposed to learn in that class. So we are very comfortable going with that teacher judgment, the high school judgment, the school district judgment, and not having the standardized test. So that's probably one of the biggest political battles going on right now in Washington state, has to do with standardized tests. I'll stop talking and see if you have more questions about that.
So David, does that answer your question?
A little bit. So basically it's gone through part of what it's needed to do to get passed, but like it's not going through the Senate at all.
Yeah, so what she said is that it's passed committee and
Go back to
passed the House, but now the Senate, remember we learned that the Senate and the House have to pass the same bill with the exact same wording. So right now the Senate still needs to vote to pass that. And it sounds like she's saying almost every senator except 10 are going to vote for it, but right now they're not going to bring it to the floor until the Senate leadership is okay with that.
Which bill number was it?
It was House Bill 1046.
And the other thing, and I can't remember the number, but I will look it up and send it to you a little later today, is the Senate sent us a bill that had to do with standardized tests. And we liked this 1046 bill better. So we actually, when we got their bill, we took our 1046 language and amended their bill with our language and sent it back to them. So we've actually passed 1046 off the House floor 3 times now with huge bipartisan support. This is not a Democrat-Republican conversation at all. We have like 92 out of 98 votes for this bill every time. Well, you can see it up there. We passed it with 92 votes. And we passed it with 89, I think, last time because several people were not there. 4 people were gone, or else we would have had like the 92. So there's huge bipartisan support for this bill in both the House and the Senate. But in the Senate, the Senate leadership and the Republican leadership is refusing to let the Senate vote on this bill. So in the meantime, all these kids aren't going to be able to graduate in the next 2 weeks. So one of the things we're doing is writing to school districts, encouraging them to let those students at least be part of the graduation ceremony, because we hate to have them stuck in this crazy political storm. And we want to make sure that they know we're going to keep working on getting them their diplomas.
Alana, did you have something you want to ask her? Okay. All right, Sullivan.
I would just like to know your opinion on the high school credits bill, House Bill 1509.
So House Bill 1509 that Sullivan's asking about is the bill that would reduce the high school credits from the core 24 requirements that's already been passed back down to the 21 credit requirements.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up. It's one of my favorite bills. I spent yesterday at this workshop that happened all over the state that the governor sponsored on career and technical education. CTE is what it's called. And I have been I think you guys know this about me. I spent 30 years in the Spokane Public Schools before I became a legislator. So public education is what I know the best. And I spent a lot of those years working with professional and technical education, which is where when you're in high school, you get an opportunity to actually go into some businesses, some workplaces, and actually see what it feels like to do that job. Because really, when you get to college and you have to make decisions on what you want to be, if you've never been in any of those businesses, it's kind of hard to guess what you might want to be. So career and technical education gives you a chance to actually learn more about the world of work and what you might want to do when you graduate from college and high school. So it's really important. And what happens with the 24 credits is it locks kids so much into having to take specific courses that they have no breathing space to actually explore what they might want to do with their lives. So as a teacher, I think that's really, it's not good for students. I mean, I'm both a teacher and I'm a mother. I have 2 kids that are now in their 30s. And so I've just watched them, try to figure out what they're going to do with their lives. If they had an opportunity to actually explore different ideas, that would serve them a lot better than having to take 24 credits. So I am very much an advocate of changing it, making sure we stay with 21 credits and not go to the 24 credit state.
All right, I think we might be almost out of time, Representative Dolan, but thank you very much for sharing today. And I'm going to encourage students to contact you through your page on the ledge.wa.gov website and get a hold of you if they have further questions or things that they want to share with you.
That'd be great. I have to tell you guys that being with you these past 2 times has been one of the most fun things I've done this session because I'm a teacher and I miss being with real live students. So thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much.
Bye.